like to introduce Carter Ash, who is the pitPRO product manager for Verdesian Life Sciences. So Carter, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, like Kevin said, I'm the manure treatment specialist with Verdesian. I've been on board for about 3 years with the company now. Grew up on a dairy operation, worked with hog operators in the area, and I've worked agronomy retail as well. So have quite a bit of experience on multiple levels of the manure handling process. And it really, when this opportunity came around, I was working agronomy retail and I missed the animal husbandry piece. So I really enjoy this area of work that we get so much overlap. So if you guys have questions, I don't know everything, but I can try to address your questions. There's a lot of context to go through with manure management. So feel free to raise your hand and chime in, and hopefully we can cover any concerns you may have. So yeah, we'll just get rolling.
Carter, if I could then, if there's a chat box down at the bottom of the screen too, so any questions that pop up, go ahead, hit chat, enter in your question, or like Carter said, raise your hand and we can call you out. So a couple opportunities there to get your questions out.
Yep. So let's see here. So those of you who have worked with Verdesian for a while may have worked with our manure treatment more than manure, and we are continuing our manure treatment work with pitPRO now. So chemically, it is very similar to more than manure, but we did change the recommendation quite a bit. So we'll go through some of those changes. We felt like there was quite a bit of a bit of value being left on the table here. And hold on just a second, my daughter's here. So, but anyways, the different value positions that we were bringing to the table were much more than nutrient use efficiency with nitrogen and phosphorus management, but it still fits in very, very well with the nitrogen and phosphorus work. And we just wanted to bring more to the table with animal health, improved manure handling, and things along those lines. So again, chemically, it is very similar to more than manure. We are still using our polymer technology, and it's been an awesome product to work with, and its versatility. It's incredibly strong negative charge is pretty impressive, and how many different areas of work that it can influence in the manure handling segment. So yeah, just its negative charge really attaches well. Its water activation really influences not just the availability of the nutrients, but the handling of the manure itself. And it's been a lot of fun to learn more about what all it does. So those of you who don't know, our negatively charged polymer chain works really well going into the manure solution. And as you can see in this illustration, there's quite a few different compounds in most manures, but at the bottom and often in the crust too, a lot more of the solid content within your manure has a lot more positively charged particles. And when you introduce pitPRO and its incredibly strong negative charge into the mix, it diffuses very well right away into the manure. And with its water activation, it pulls the positively charged particles up into fluid suspension right away. And we'll have some pretty good visuals to show with that. And with that change in distribution, you know, we get a much more even mix of the manure. We see the solids get pulled out a lot easier, and it's been an awesome user experience so far with the product. So with that, if you guys ever get a chance to I highly encourage you guys to go out there with the farmer and watch it get applied to the storage, because it's a lot of fun to watch. But it also, there was a lot of work that we really couldn't put our finger on. We knew the chemical mode of action, but then there was this black magic going on, and this is what we've learned the most about recently. So I'll show this quick video. So as you can see, it's fun to see it bubble up. And if you have an open manure storage, you can apply it in like the southwest corner of the manure storage, the pit. And then if you look towards the northeast, often you'll see it bubbling up through the crust on the other side of the storage. So it's really impressive how it pulls itself through the pit. And then that bubbling really does a lot of changing and work in the pit's environment too. So oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes right away, you'll notice a fairly quick drop in some of the more noxious gases that are being let off by the manure. So the two most concerning gases that most manure handlers worry about are the ammonia gas and the hydrogen sulfide. Both of these, the hydrogen sulfide is dangerous and poisonous. And then the ammonia is a strong irritant, and it can get to dangerous levels as well. And it is very often the case that we apply the product and come back a little bit later after application, after it's had some time to diffuse, and we'll see numbers get knocked down right away from 77 parts per million down to 0, and from 277 down to 27. And the chemical mode of action explains quite a bit with the ammonia piece, but we couldn't really figure out the hydrogen sulfide piece till just recently. So what is really going on with the influence in the biology is we have our chemical mode of action, but that's influencing the ORP, or the oxidation reduction potential. And why this is important is because that influences the microbial activity that range between aerobic and anaerobic and everything in between. So if you look here, hydrogen sulfide gas production and methane gas production, which is obviously explosive, both of those are in this really anaerobic area of ORP rating. And by treating our manure with pitPRO, we increase the ORP rating to pull it just outside of these two areas of gas production. And with that, not only is it reducing these gases, but you're increasing the biological diversity in the pit, which helps with mineralization of the different nutrients so that you can break them down and have a more plant available at application. So, and the pieces of the story really come together. Previously, we'd see things like the manure getting applied, and we'd have a treated and untreated barn, and you'd come out and you'd see the untreated pit foaming up. And we'd wonder, okay, well, why is this untreated facility foaming up and the treated one isn't? pitPRO doesn't necessarily have an anti-foaming agent in it, but it's the influence in the biology of the manure that's really changing what's going on in that manure storage. So with less methane production, most of the time the foaming is really influenced by methane production when it's stuck in the barn. When we knock that down, we knock the foaming down. So we've seen it quite often where we see less foaming in the barn itself. And with that, less gas production in the barn, we are also pulling together information about improved animal health. This information is really exciting to attain. It's really hard to attain this information, but we've worked really closely with a large integrator in Southeast Iowa And Dave Schwartz and the team started this stuff before I was on board, but we were able to pull through this data, and we worked with them and pulling through the performance numbers. So you look at these days on feed. Okay, we knocked a couple days on feed, and the average market weight was up a little bit. So it doesn't look too drastic, but this is per head. These numbers are calculated per head. So when you spread that out across 1,200 head or 2,400 space barn, that adds up to some serious production improvements. And with that, we see quite a bit of value. These 80 cents per head and 40 cents per head values, so 120 per head, was calculated back in July of last year when you couldn't get rid of pigs if you really tried. So anyways, the numbers since then have almost doubled on hogs, and therefore the value that it's bringing in the improved animal performance is doubling as well. So so that's the animal performance area value. The manure handling area value, that one's going to be a little bit different for each guy, but it's a pretty safe assumption. If you're going in totally blind, don't know much about the context of the manure storage and the situation, you can safely bet that it's going to start out at $10,000 to pump out 1 million gallons of liquid manure. A lot of dairy guys who have weaker manure, they might be able to get it a little less than 10,000, but most of the hog production, that manure is hotter, so it's likely to be quite a bit more, closer to that $15,000 or $20,000 to pump out 1 million gallons. And that's just the base price. If you have a lot of extra agitation required because you have a lot of crusting, a lot of solids that won't pump out at the bottom of your pit, and you have to bring in an extra tractor for an extra day or two ahead of time, or run it hard the entire pump out process, that adds up really quick too. $75 an hour, not including fuel, is $1,800 for a day. So and with that too, guys who have lost storage capacity because the solids don't pump out, we've seen guys who had lost storage capacity regain their storage capacity by up to 34% in that first year. So often is the case, guys who have lost storage capacity in their facilities, they took more than 1 year to lose that, to let all those solids build up. And so you're looking at something that maybe took place over 5 or 10 years, this problem to build up. And when we're regaining that much ground after just the very first use, it really can impress a lot of guys. So, and with that improved agitation, not only is it like reducing the amount of work to agitate, but the nutrients are getting distributed a lot better. The nutrient that I look most closely at is phosphorus, pounds of phos per 1,000 gallons of liquid manure. The reason I look at this is phosphorus being inherently negatively charged. It often attaches to a lot of the positively charged particles, a lot of the heavier particles in the manure. So your calciums, magnesium, iron, the stuff that's often very strong and present in the solids and the sludge at the bottom. And this trial was done with a dairy operation in central Minnesota, north central Minnesota. And he has a 3 million gallon manure storage. And when the previous year, he started the pump out, and it was 6 pounds of phos per 1,000 gallons of liquid manure. And it slowly creep up there. And then at the very end, it just jump up to 22. So, more than triple the rate change, where the very following year, we treated it with pitPRO and we flatlined it for the first 75% of the pump out. And even when it did climb a little bit at the end, it only climbed 4 pounds. So we see much more consistent manure getting pumped out, better distribution of those nutrients, which is something that we weren't able to put a lot of value to, but in recent seminars and talking with some professors, we were able to pull some information from Dr. Dan Anderson's seminar with Iowa State University. He said that the proper distribution of the phosphorus when you're applying it to fields that need the phosphorus versus fields closer to the farm that maybe don't need the phosphorus is $7 an acre. And that's just the phosphorus use. That's not including the improved performance and better utility of the other nutrients as well. So definitely a lot of value being had simply from the nutrient distribution. Here's a tabletop demonstration. It's actually 2 jars of water and barn lime, but it's a strong illustration of how it really keeps those solids up into fluid suspension. So this is over the course of roughly 3 minutes. I did a time lapse, but you see in the left jar is untreated and the solids just don't stay suspended very well. In the treated jar that to our right, they do. So it takes far less agitation to really keep those nutrients distributed better. So, and we've been observing this for a long time, but we continue to pull more information and customer experiences. So previously, if you were pulling one sample out during a pump out halfway through, you know, we'd notice the untreated facility had much lower nutrient content. Well, the nutrients were in the pit, they were just stuck in the pit, creating headaches, and you know, you're losing storage. So the untreated pit, we had lower nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium levels, and then the treated, both at the beginning and the end of the pump out process, we saw higher numbers. Well, even right away, we're putting more nutrients out earlier on in the pump out process. So huge value being brought forward there. And our retailers, not just our farmers, but our retailers have observed this as well. In the treated facilities, we just see higher nutrient content earlier on in the pump out process. We're actually putting those nutrients to work instead of leaving them as sludge at the bottom. So, and this of course translates to stronger yields. So not only are we putting those nutrients to work, but we're still utilizing our exchange resin, our polymer technology to let those nutrients stay plant available. Phosphorus, you can have high phosphorus load in the soil, but with CEC in the wrong place, you know, along a lot of calcium or magnesium in the soil, it's not plant available. Our polymer technology helps keep it plant available, which really helps improve crop performance. It's not easy to come to these side-by-side trials, but when you do, you should feel pretty confident that looking at the yield monitor, at the average stock count and kernel counts, you're going to see better performance numbers with the treated manure against the untreated check. So the rates of the manure are pretty easy to figure out. So for hogs, if you're going in blind, hogs and cattle, my go-to recommendation is 3 gallons of treatment per 100,000 gallons of liquid manure. You can go up and down from there. So with hog operators, you know, the lower rate that we would ever recommend is 2 gallons of treatment per 100,000 gallon. With dairy cattle, some of the weaker manures, we go down to 1.5 gallons. If you have especially problematic manure storage, you have a lot of crust you're trying to bust up, a lot of sludge you're trying to pump out right away, then we go to these higher rates. But it's a pretty simple calculation, you know, 20 gallons. If you have a 1,000,000 gallon pit, 10 times this, just 20 gallons of treatment. If you don't have much problem and you're really just looking for consistency and nutrient protection. So, and the application process is really simple as well. Especially when we compare ourselves against competing products that address concerns in the manure storage, we are really user friendly, really easy to use. So if you have a 1,000,000-gallon facility that needs 30 gallons of treatment and you pump out once a year in November, then it's really straightforward. You wait till there's the pit is 25% full because it is a water activated molecule. You apply half of what you need for the treatment, so 15 gallons in this scenario. And then you wait till June and you apply another 7.5, and then October or a few weeks before pump out, we would ask you to apply the remaining balance of the treatment. The main reason that we ask for these multiple applications is to really keep that ORP level high. As we stretch it out, in an ideal world, it would be stretched out even more evenly, but we've had very good user experiences with 3 applications. Guys who have used more than manure did 1 application, they saw excellent results, and if that's what you like, you can stick to that single application. But I really think that we're getting extra value, we're getting a lot of value with at least 3 applications of the product. And then applying it is pretty easy to on site, in that we just ask for 2 application spots. And we know that sometimes, especially in the upper Midwest, the winters, we don't have access to 2 application spots, especially if you have an open manure storage facility. So if you have to apply during at least 1 and maybe 2 of the applications, all of the product in through the pump out, go ahead and do that. As you saw it bubble up, you should feel confident that it's going to diffuse on its own. But when it is possible, we do ask for 2 application spots in 2 of the more opposite ends that you have access to. So, and then in the end, you know, the ease of use and the value that it brings, you really need to be able to put pencil to paper for some of this. So the 3 areas of returns that our growers see the most are when they have agitation concerns. You know, if they have to bring in an agitation boat or an extra tractor and pump. If you're cutting out 2 days of a tractor and pump, you're saving $3,600 right there. Even if it's your own equipment, it's still wear and tear and it's still your time. But then if you're one of the farmers who owns their own hogs and you're counting on the hogs to perform to make ends meet, you're going to see on a 2,400 space facility, you know, roughly 1,000,000 gallons of manure, you're going to see 11K worth of improved hog performance. So, and with that hog performance piece, I feel like, and those that I work with feel like those are very conservative numbers of value to bring forward. So I did these calculations this past January, and the value of the hogs has increased considerably since then, and we're forecasting to increase a little more here in June as well. So I think with the split applications of the product, we can really see higher numbers yet of hog performance being brought to the table. But one that most every farmer gets to observe too is the nutrient availability and distribution piece. So with over 10 grand of improved yield through nutrient availability, and you layer all 3 of these, you have potentially 25K of layered returns. And with an MSRP of $90 on a 20-gallon application, you're only looking at $1,800 to bring in that much value. So, and the one thing that I want to leave most everybody with is the piece that you really can't put pencil to paper to, and that's just the headache and the time that it's saving you in the most stressful time of the year. So whether you pump out once a year or twice a year, it's relatively certain that you're going to be pumping out in the fall or you're going to be pumping out in the spring or both. And both of those times are already high stress times of the year. You're trying to either plant or get the fields prepped, or you're trying to harvest and follow up with some application and tillage as well. So if you can save even just a few hours, you can get a lot done. You get your crop in earlier. You don't have as many machinery problems. And with the older piece, you have your neighbors are happier too, especially during the pump out experience. So yeah, I know we went through a lot of information really quick and we could dive deeper. So, but that's what I got for right now. Thank you guys for chiming in on this presentation. And are there any questions as of right now?
Yeah, one just popped up from Russ. For spring pumping, is this needed? How long should this be dumped in before pumping? So how long? Yeah.
So my recommendation is a month and a half. I like to see at least a month and a half to really see improvements on the handling of the manure. And I also like to, if you have less than month and a half of time between, you know, application and pump out, then I would definitely go to the higher recommended rates. So if you have a hog facility, I would probably go to that 4-gallon rate, and I'd still feel pretty confident. But the more time you can give it, the better value you're definitely going to be bringing to the table as you give those microbes a lot of opportunity to do a lot of work. I talked a lot about the guys who have these crusts. We have one farmer not far from me who used to pump out his slurry store, and before he would start pumping out, he used to have to agitate for 2 to 3 days to get that 2-foot crust softened up and busted up. After he used it the first time, he had about a month and a half of time for it to work. He knocked it down from 2 days to 12 hours of agitation, and then it busted up right away for him. But he continued using the product, and he went from 12 hours, you know, after the first use to after the second use, it was down to 2 hours. And now he says he's at the lowest application rate, and it busts up pretty much instantly once he applies it. So I say all that just to basically, you know, hopefully give you guys confidence that it's going to perform well in that first use, even with limited amount of time, but it's going to perform better with continued use and more time. So.
Okay. Then one more question I got here is basically comes down to, you know, they're not all that concerned about phosphorus. What alternatives do we have when it comes to just managing nitrogen?
Yeah, no, so we do have, it's not on this particular slide deck, but we do have our Nutrisphere N available as a manure treatment. There is a label so that we can apply it. It's roughly 12 to 16 ounces per acre. It is a much cheaper option. I do firmly believe that the pitPRO is bringing more value to the table, particularly because of the improved manure handling, the distribution of the nutrients. I have more confidence in the pitPRO's performance. But if you're just looking for nitrogen management, that Nutrisphere option is an excellent option, and it comes in at a really reasonable price point. So you can get it down to $7 an acre, depending on your situation. So it's pretty affordable. Some guys, depending on how much they're putting out, might be able to do a little less than that suggested retail, but context is everything. So if nitrogen management is the only thing you're worried about and you're looking for, you know, strong season-long protection, that Nutrisphere option is out there for you guys. So.
All right. So that's kind of one more just popped up. pitPRO, roughly how much per acre? So if I want me to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, you can.
So a lot depends on that one. That the retail rate for pitPRO is $90 a gallon. And if you're using the 3 gallon per 100,000 gallon treatment rate, And then also assuming 4,000 gallons per acre of application, you're right there in that $10 per acre area.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, so I'm going to try to share the screen here. Kevin actually put together an excellent calculator to help us crunch some of these numbers. So let's see here. I get to the Zoom call and share screen. Yeah, share. He hit it right on the head. Depending, there's a lot that goes into.
So you got the new year one up.
Yep.
Tab.
So if we look at the pitPRO one, you know, we're looking at $10.80 per acre. That's kind of with the 3-gallon rate, which is our go-to rate, but there is variation, and we do encourage you guys to be honest in your judgment call and stick to what you feel is going to perform well. So if you're really trying to whittle down the price, you can go at the lower rate, but I would just take that with a grain of salt and expectations for performance, especially if you're limited with the time. But the Nutrisphere option, I mean, we can get that down $8 an acre, and that's assuming 4,000 gallons to the acre in the higher rate. So there's a 12 ounce per acre option, that the range. And if you're going at a higher or lower rate, that's going to influence the cost. But yeah, I like the volumetric recommendation just because that's the way I'm triggered to calculate things. But I know a lot of guys like to break it down cost per acre. So whatever the farmer is talking, you can reach out to Kevin or I, and we should be able to help you figure that out.
Yeah, good point, Carter. So with that, you know, any questions that do come up after this, reach out to your local retail agronomist, that whoever you're working with. And if they're unable to help you, they'll reach out to whoever their Verdesian account manager is. And then we can, after that, reach out to Carter, see where the questions are, and he'd be more than happy to come down for a on-site visit. So with that, Carter, I appreciate your participation, and to all who took their evening out. How many of you guys are eating dinner while you're watching this, but appreciate your time, and any questions that come up, please feel free to reach out. So with that, thanks everyone, and spring is in air, and be safe.
Yep. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin.